The grand ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers. Laughter and the clink of champagne glasses filled the air. I stood near the lavish buffet, feeling entirely out of place in my simple black dress. On the stage, my father, Charles Carter, beamed as the company's CEO. Ethan Wright praised his 40 years of loyal service. My mother, Diana, floated through the crowd, her smile radiant. Then she spotted me. She glided over, her expression tightening. She leaned in, her voice a sharp whisper meant only for me, but loud enough for the guests nearby to hear. "Rachel, please. Just for once, behave. Don't ruin the night like last time." A few people snickered. I felt my cheeks burn, frozen in place. And then, as if on cue, CEO Ethan Wright concluded his speech and walked directly toward us. He smiled politely, his gaze fixed on me. "Rachel," he said, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." My mother's smile vanished. How did he know my name? My mind flashed back to last time, my father's 60th birthday dinner. I had stood up to give a toast, my heart full. I wanted to talk about how much I looked up to him, how I hoped to make him proud in my own career. But my voice had wavered with emotion. Before I could finish, my mother had cut in with a loud, tinkling laugh. "Oh, Rachel, always so dramatic. Let's not bore everyone with tears." The room had erupted in nervous laughter. I had shrunk back into my chair, my words dying in my throat. That night, I promised myself I would never be put in that position again. Now, at this even grander event, the same humiliating script was starting. I braced myself, expecting the CEO to simply be polite before moving on to the important guests. But the look in his eyes was one of genuine recognition, and that changed everything. We moved to a table, the air around us thick with unspoken tension. My mother, Diana, leaned toward a senior partner's wife, her whisper carrying. "Our Rachel is still finding her way, you know. It's so competitive out there for young people." I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. Ethan Wright, now seated nearby, turned his attention to me. "And Rachel, what are you working on these days?" he asked kindly. I took a shallow breath, ready to give my usual, deflecting answer. "I'm between things at the moment," I said, the practiced words tasting like ash. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly. "That's funny," he said, his voice clear and carrying. "I could have sworn I just saw your name on a groundbreaking proposal my team approved last week." The entire table fell silent. My mother's champagne flute halted halfway to her lips. A forced, brittle laugh escaped my mother's lips. "Oh, Mr. Wright, you must be thinking of a different Rachel. It's a common name." She patted my arm condescendingly. "Our Rachel isn't in that line of work." Ethan shook his head, his gaze never leaving mine. He seemed amused by the correction. "No, I'm quite certain. Rachel Carter. The marketing strategist behind the Aura campaign. It was a brilliant piece of work. One of the most insightful presentations I've seen in years." My father, Charles, who had been basking in the glow of the party, now looked acutely uncomfortable, his smile strained. My mother's perfectly crafted expression of maternal concern finally fractured, revealing pure confusion underneath. I sat perfectly still, my heart hammering against my ribs. He didn't just know my name. He knew my work. The conversation swirled around me, but I couldn't hear a word. The CEO's recognition was a life raft, but my mother's sharp whisper still felt like an anchor pulling me down. "Excuse me," I mumbled, pushing my chair back. I needed air. I fled to the restroom, locking myself in a marble stall. I leaned against the cool door, pressing my palms to my burning face. My reflection in the ornate mirror showed a woman on the verge of breaking. I remembered every time my mother had told me I was too sensitive, that my ambitions were unrealistic, that I should be happy with a quiet, simple life. I had internalized it all, believing I was never enough. But Ethan Wright had just seen my work and called it brilliant. A new, fierce resolve straightened my spine. No more shrinking. No more hiding. I stepped out of the restroom, my head held higher. To my surprise, Ethan Wright was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall as if he had all the time in the world. "There you are," he said with a small smile. "I've been hoping for a moment to talk to you alone." He gestured toward a quiet terrace overlooking the city lights. My pulse quickened. We stepped outside, the cool night air a sharp contrast to the stuffy ballroom. "I meant what I said in there," he began. "That proposal of yours? It wasn't just good. It identified a flaw in our supply chain marketing that's been costing us millions. Your solution is projected to save the company a fortune." He explained that my work had been submitted through a small, anonymous freelance agency I used. He never knew the brilliant strategist was his longtime employee's daughter. Just as Ethan was about to continue, my mother appeared on the terrace, her smile back in place but her eyes sharp. "Mr. Wright. There you are. The board members are asking for you. You simply must try the dessert tort." She linked her arm with his, expertly pulling him away from me. As she steered him back toward the party, she shot a searing glance over her shoulder at me. "For heaven's sake, Rachel, don't embarrass yourself," she hissed under her breath. "He's just being polite to the daughter of a retiree. Don't read into it." But as Ethan allowed himself to be led away, he glanced back at me. It wasn't a look of pity or politeness. It was a look of solid respect, and a silent promise to continue our conversation. For the very first time that night, I saw a flicker of genuine nervousness in my mother's eyes. Back inside, the formal toasts began. My father stood at the microphone, his voice thick with emotion. He thanked the company, he praised his loyal team, he gushed about my mother, his rock, and even gave a shout-out to my brother, Mark, for making him proud. The applause was thunderous. He smiled, basking in the glow, and moved to step down. I held my breath. He had skipped me. Again. Just like every other important event in our family's life, I was the afterthought, the invisible child. I forced a smile, my hands clenched in my lap. But then, Ethan Wright stood up. "Charles, if I may," he said, taking the microphone. "I'd like to add one more thing to the toast." The room fell silent, curious. Ethan raised his glass toward my father. "To Charles Carter, for 40 years of dedicated service. We are all grateful for your contributions." He paused, letting the applause subside. Then he turned his gaze directly to me. "And I'd like to make a special toast. To his daughter, Rachel." A wave of whispers rippled through the room. While Charles has been a pillar of our past, Rachel's work has already begun to shape our company's future. Her strategic mind is precisely the kind of talent that will lead us into our next chapter. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Camera phones, which had been pointed at my father, now swiveled toward me. My mother's face drained of all color, her smile a ghost on her lips. Every single person in the room was staring at me, waiting for my reaction. The air crackled with tension. I felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon me. My father was staring at me, stunned. My mother looked as if she'd been slapped. This was the moment I had always dreaded, the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. But this time it was different. This time it was for all the right ones. I took a slow, deep breath and stood up, my legs trembling but my voice steady. "Thank you, Ethan," I said, meeting his gaze. I then turned to the crowd. "I have learned so much from my father over the years," I continued calmly. "I learned from his incredible strengths, his work ethic." I paused, letting my eyes meet my father's. And, perhaps just as importantly, I learned from his blind spots. A collective, sharp intake of breath echoed in the ballroom. The polite facade of the party had been shattered. The party ended in a blur of awkward handshakes and averted glances. I gathered my coat, ready to slip away into the night. But as I walked through the nearly empty parking lot, I heard my father's angry footsteps behind me. "Rachel." "What was that?" he demanded, his face flushed with a mixture of champagne and fury. "You humiliated me in front of the entire company." You made me look like a fool. The old me would have apologized, would have shrunk under his anger. But the new me just looked at him. No, Dad, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I didn't make you look small. I just finally stopped making myself invisible for your comfort. The truth of my words hung in the cold air between us. He was speechless. And then, from the shadows, another voice spoke. Ethan Wright stepped forward, his car keys in hand. Charles, I couldn't help but overhear, he said, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. You should be nothing but proud. The strategic analysis Rachel presented identified a multi-million-dollar inefficiency. Her work didn't just impress me, it saved this company a significant amount of money. That's the opposite of humiliation. My father stared at Ethan, then back at me, his anger morphing into sheer, uncomprehending shock. He had no response. He simply turned and walked stiffly toward his car, a defeated slump in his shoulders he'd never had before. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a profound, weary sense of closure. Ethan turned to me. My office. 9 a.m. Monday. We have a lot to discuss. The moment I walked into my parents' house, the calm I felt shattered. My mother was waiting, her composure completely gone. How could you, Rachel, she seethed, her voice trembling with rage. That was your father's night. His moment. And you selfishly stole the spotlight to make it all about you. She continued to berate me, listing every perceived failure, every disappointment. I stood and listened, but for the first time, her words didn't stick. They slid off me like water. I heard the desperation in her voice, the fear of losing control. When she paused for breath, I simply picked up my purse. I'm leaving now, Mom, I said calmly. I walked out mid-sentence, leaving her standing alone in the foyer. Back in my small, quiet apartment, a sense of peace settled over me. I opened my laptop, ready to build my own future. At 9 a.m. sharp on Monday, I sat in Ethan Wright's sleek corner office. He slid a contract across the polished mahogany desk. The title is Director of Strategic Innovation, he said. The role involves overseeing the implementation of your proposed strategies and leading a new, cross-functional team. The salary, as you'll see, reflects the importance of this position. It was more than I had ever dreamed of. I accepted without hesitation, signing my name with a steady hand. I later learned from a gossipy industry newsletter that the position had been all but promised to a protege of my father's, a man he had been mentoring for years. My father's recommendation had been overruled by the CEO himself. The news spread through the company grapevine like wildfire. I knew it would only be a matter of time before my father heard. The confrontation happened in Ethan's office. My father, using his remaining influence, demanded a private meeting. I heard about it from Ethan's assistant. Charles Carter was apparently furious, accusing Ethan of hiring me out of pity or as a public relations stunt after the retirement party. He argued that I didn't have the experience, that it was unfair to his protege. Ethan, ever calm, didn't argue. He simply turned his monitor around and showed my father the cold, hard data. The analytics from my proposal, the projected savings, the client feedback. The numbers didn't lie. I was told my father left the office 15 minutes later, silent and ashen-faced. The realization that I hadn't just gotten lucky, but had genuinely outpaced him and his chosen successor for years, was a devastating blow. My mother tried a new tactic, rallying the family. At a tense Sunday dinner, my brother, Mark, parroted her words. It's just a shame, Ratch, how you set Dad up to fail like that. Taking that job knowing it was meant for his guy. I had anticipated this. I remained calm, cutting into my roast chicken. Is that what Mom told you? I asked. I pulled out my phone. I think you should hear this. I played a voice memo Ethan had sent me after I signed the contract. His voice filled the quiet dining room. Utterly brilliant work, Rachel. That insight saved us $1.2 million in the first quarter alone. You've already made a bigger impact than most VPs here. The recording ended. The color drained from my mother's face. Her web of lies collapsed in the span of 30 seconds. Walking the corporate halls as an employee was a strange experience. Whispers followed me, but they were different now. "That's Charles Carter's daughter," people would say, but the tone had changed from pity to curiosity. "Did you know she's the one behind the Aura campaign? How could he have never mentioned her? She's a genius." The resemblance between my father and me, once ignored, was now a topic of conversation. A month into my new role, Ethan sent a company-wide email announcing a new, high-stakes digital transformation project. At the bottom, it stated that the project would be led by me, Rachel Carter, and that I would report directly to the CEO. The power dynamic in our family had irrevocably shifted. The corporate press release hit every major business feed. Wright Global appoints Rachel Carter as Director of Strategic Growth, the headline read. There was a professional photo of me next to a quote from Ethan, calling my hiring a pivotal moment for the company's future. Industry reporters and analysts hailed it as a fresh, forward-thinking era for the state corporation. That evening, I drove to my parents' house to pick up some old belongings. Through the living room window, I saw my mother sitting alone on the sofa, staring at her tablet. The blue light of the screen illuminated her face, which was frozen, staring at the headline with my photo beside Ethan's. She looked utterly lost. The fallout for my parents was social. My father's old golf buddies asked why he'd never bragged about his superstar daughter. My mother's friends inquired about my sudden, meteoric rise, their questions laced with a new, grudging respect. Panicked, my mother began a campaign of reconciliation. My phone buzzed with incessant, sweetly worded invitations to dinner, to brunch, to just talk. I ignored them all until one day, I didn't. I replied to the dinner invitation with a simple, "I'll be there." Then I added, "I hope you don't mind, but I'm bringing a colleague along." She replied instantly, thrilled, assuming it was a junior assistant she could impress. I arrived at my parents' house with Ethan right by my side. My mother's face was a masterpiece of suppressed shock. She recovered quickly, ushering us in with a flood of charm and hospitality. She performed the role of the proud, supportive mother perfectly, laying it on thick. "We've always encouraged Rachel to follow her passions," she trilled to Ethan over the main course. Ethan nodded, his expression polite but unreadable. Then he spoke. "It's funny you say that," he began, setting down his fork. "Rachel told me how much your unwavering encouragement meant to her during her early career struggles. She said you were her biggest cheerleader." The lie hung in the air, so blatant and audacious. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. I looked directly at her, offering a sweet, innocent smile. "Oh, yes," I said softly. I told him everything. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What is she talking about, Rachel?" my father asked, his voice strained. I put my napkin on the table. "I was just telling Ethan how you both supported me," I said, my voice calm and steady. I began to recount, not with anger, but with simple, devastating facts, the years of dismissals. I told them about the time I got my first promotion and Mom said, "Don't get too ambitious, dear." I recalled the internship I landed that Dad called a cute little job. I spoke of every dream that was met with a warning, every success that was minimized. My father stammered, trying to form a defense. But my mother had heard enough. She slammed her hands on the table. "That is enough. You are twisting everything. You always twist things to make yourself the victim." I stood up, my movement slow and deliberate. The chaos at the table ceased. I looked at my mother, not with anger, but with a profound, final pity. "No, Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not twisting anything. You just don't like seeing your reflection anymore." I turned and walked out of the dining room, through the foyer, and out the front door into the cool night. Ethan followed a moment later. He didn't offer empty comfort. Instead, he said, "You know, you don't need their approval anymore. You haven't for a long time. By any metric that matters, you've already surpassed it." He was right. The need for their validation, which had haunted me for so long, finally evaporated. A month later was the company's annual gala. It was held in the same ballroom as my father's retirement party. The irony was not lost on me. My father attended as a guest, a retired former employee. I was on the stage, delivering the keynote address on the company's future. After thunderous applause, Ethan joined me at the podium. He praised my work, my leadership, my vision. Then he made another announcement. Effective immediately, I am promoting Rachel Carter to Vice President of Strategic Development. The applause was deafening. I stood there, in a gown of deep blue, my head high. As the crowd roared, I let my gaze drift across the audience. I found my parents, sitting at a table near the back. I held their gaze for a single, powerful moment. After the gala, they approached me. Their demeanor was completely different, humble, warm, their smiles strained but trying. "Rachel, honey, we are so proud of you," my mother gushed, reaching to hug me. My father nodded, his eyes watery. "You've really done it, kid. You've surpassed us all." I listened to their words, this sudden, convenient pride. I smiled a small, polite smile and took a slight step back, breaking the embrace. "You were right, Mom," I said, my voice clear and calm. "A person really shouldn't ruin anyone's special night. So I'll keep this short. I forgive you for everything. But I'm done." I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, utterly speechless in the middle of the celebrating crowd. Months later, I sat in my new corner office, the city skyline sprawling beneath my window. It was peaceful. A courier delivered a small, elegant envelope. Inside was a handwritten retirement card from Ethan, who was embarking on a year-long world tour with his family. His message was simple: never let small minds define a big heart. It has been the privilege of my career to watch you soar. P.S. The board is unanimous. I smiled, a true, peaceful smile. The P.S. could only mean one thing. The nomination for his successor was official, and my name was at the top of the list. The journey that started with a humiliating whisper at a party had ended here, in this quiet moment of absolute power and freedom. Justice, I thought, had never felt so calm.